despite the two shows taking place in the same city and being on the same TV network. Like, come on! Hi, I'm Claudia, and crossover fanfics aren't talked about nearly enough. Anytime I see them being brought up on like TikTok, it's because they're being like kind of the butt of the joke, which I have to admit is pretty funny. I myself have made TikToks joking about unexpected crossovers in fanfiction, but still, I do love a good crossover fanfic. Some of them can just be so good and exactly what you need to make your heart happy. So if you are one of those people who have been constantly excluding crossovers from your AO3 search results and have abstained from reading them for your entire life, I am here to try and convince you. Am I qualified for this? Probably not. But I do have almost 8 years of reading fanfiction under my belt, and within that I've read quite a few crossover fanfics. So while I have never actually written a crossover fanfic, I've read enough of them to kind of know what they're about and to be able to tell you what they're about. But first of all, we must obviously answer the question of what is a crossover fanfic? Now this definition is going to differ for everyone, but for me, a crossover fanfic is a fanfic which contains 2 or more fandoms that are from different franchises. And to use my favourite TV show 911 as an example, if I saw a fanfic which was tagged with both 911 and the spin-off show 911 Lone Star, I would not count that as a crossover fanfic because canonically those 2 shows take place in the same universe. However, if 911 say crossed over with Chicago Fire, a completely separate show, that is a crossover fanfic. And that actually leads me very nicely onto my first topic, which is what kind of crossover fanfics do I really enjoy? For me, a good crossover fanfic means the fandoms are similar enough that it feels real. To use my previous example of 911 and Chicago Fire, both of those TV shows are about firefighters in their respective cities in America. So a crossover between the 2 of them does make logical sense in your brain. Those are the crossover fanfics I do tend to enjoy the most, the ones that kind of make logical sense. But there are other fanfics which have fandoms that cross over that don't really make logical sense. Like you can have fanfics which have one fandom in just regular modern 21st century times and the other one is like in a fantasy world, but somehow they make sense. Now I don't tend to read many of these because I'm not really in any fandoms that have like any kind of fantasy elements, but if you are and that feels like your thing, I highly recommend you go check them out. That's the thing with crossover fanfics. I feel like for them to be like specifically your taste, you have to find your 2 favourite fandoms and find a fanfic that just combines them. So for me, that is 911 crossing over with the One Chicago universe, which is like my perfect fanfic. And there are so many that are just so good and I love them so much. If you're also a 911 fan, you may have seen them in your search results already and just skipped over them, especially if you haven't watched the One Chicago universe. That is also a problem with crossover fanfics because you might like the look of one but you don't know one of the fandoms that it's crossing over with. I have that problem with 911 fanfics because quite a lot of the time they cross over with a show called Hawaii Five-0, which is not available for free on streaming anywhere in the UK. So no matter how much I want to watch it, I cannot. I mean, I could buy it, but I'm not really going to buy a TV show where I'm not even sure I'm going to like it. That just doesn't feel like a good financial decision. But if you read enough of the crossover fanfics where there's like 5 fandoms and you know 4 of them but don't know one and it's always the same one you don't know, eventually you'll just get enough kind of like context from reading all those fics that you're able to kind of figure it out. And if you really want to read a fic and you really just don't know anything about one of the fandoms in it, just Google it. You'll probably get a good enough answer from Google. I feel like every like TV show, movie, book series has its own fan wiki these days, so just look for that and it'll probably tell you what's going on. But if you do watch a lot of TV shows that kind of have similar themes, so if you're like me and watch a lot of procedural shows, you'll find that a lot of them have crossovers with each other. But also if 2 TV shows take place in the same like city, you will quite often find crossover fics between them. Or if you like me watch a lot of say Criminal Minds where they travel all over the country for the show, you can just have them go to the city where your other TV show takes place in and boom, you got a crossover fanfic. Like what I'm talking about here is Criminal Minds and 911, which I feel like I've only seen like 1 or 2 fanfics for, but I feel like it'd be really good. Or for the example I said before of 2 TV shows taking place in the same city, the one I see the most for that is 911 and The Rookie, which I finally watched earlier this year. And it's so good. I'm very excited for season 8 of The Rookie. Anyway, it was confirmed pretty recently, I think by showrunners on The Rookie, that there would never be a crossover between 911 and The Rookie, despite the 2 shows taking place in the same city and being on the same TV network. Like, come on! Like, they're filming in the same place. Can they just go and say hi to each other? Please! Like, I would genuinely cry if we got a crossover episode between The Rookie and 911. But anyway, as it seems right now, it's never gonna happen. Crossover fanfics are the best we're gonna get. So I will read them because I think Evan Buckley and Lucy Chen would be besties. And if that can only happen in fanfiction, then I will read that fanfiction. That really hurt my leg when I just slapped it. Like, just because the producers don't see the vision of Evan Buckley and Lucy Chen being besties does not mean I have to suffer. I have fanfiction so that it can fill the void in my heart. But similarly to that, if you've ever had two characters on different like TV shows or in different book series or whatever that you think would be best friends if they were in the same universe, find a crossover fic. It probably exists. And if it doesn't exist, go write it, because someone else out there is definitely waiting for it. Also, my favourite medical drama in the entire world, which is called Code Black, was devastatingly cancelled in 2018 after only 3 seasons. But anyway, it takes place in LA, so there are like 5 fanfics out there where it crosses over with 911, and 5 is good enough for me. There's also quite a lot of fanfics, at least that I've seen, where you will have X fandom crossing over with the Avengers fandom, which I personally love as someone who, like, pre-Marvel oversaturation starting like 2022 was a big Marvel fan. I love that, because fandoms like that, where it quite obviously takes place in like modern day, are quite easy to add into other fandoms that also take place about the same time period. Sometimes you might have to like fiddle with timelines to get crossover fanfics to work, but that's alright, no one minds about that. Like, I don't mind suspending my disbelief a little bit and saying that like season 1 of 911 took place at the same time as like season 3 of Chicago Fire, because they very obviously didn't, like, timeline wise, but in my head that doesn't matter, they can. I just think crossover fanfics are the perfect bridge for 2 different fandoms to meet in the middle, and I love that, because also you can use them as like a way to introduce people to a new fandom. Like, I could say, oh, all these people who are 911 fans, why don't you read this fanfic where they briefly cross over with Chicago Fire, see if you like it, and I can try and convince you to then watch Chicago Fire, which if you're a 911 fan, you should definitely watch Chicago Fire, it's so good. Also, what's like even better is if you have 2 characters on TV shows where their parentage is kind of a bit like fuzzy, and then in the fanfic you can make them siblings or adopted siblings or half siblings, anything to get that family connection across shows, because I love that. Like, give me a character from one show getting hurt and then the character from another show showing up, no one knowing that that's their sibling. Like, I love that. Have I read too many 911 Chicago Fire crossover fanfics where that is the case for Buck? Maybe, but I don't care, I want more. So if you have a favourite TV show and you have another favourite TV show which has like a similar premise, look for a crossover fanfic, it probably exists. And like, I love crossover fanfics so much that sometimes if the situation calls for it and I'm in the right mindset, I will search only crossover fanfics on AO3. I will click the elusive show only crossovers button. I will do that. I've even read fanfics where there are ships across different fandoms. They are very much an acquired taste, but I do like them sometimes nonetheless. You have a character who is very sad and constantly single on one show, and you have another character who's very sad and constantly single on another show, but you think they'd be a great fit for the other one? Just put them in a crossover fanfic. Obviously, a lot of these crossovers would never like actually happen in real life. Like, I think the only time I've ever seen like a crossover episode of a TV show where the 2 shows weren't the same franchise was when 911 crossed over with Dr. Odyssey. And that was barely a crossover. I mean, it was just Athena and they were making her relive her cruise ship trauma, which just felt mean. But anyway, I'm not going to go into that right now. But if you are a 911 fan and you're thinking, I also like the One Chicago series, I would quite like to read a crossover fanfic between those 2 shows. Look for it. I promise you it will be so worth it. Obviously, there are some fanfics which are just like 911 with Chicago Fire, and then there are some which are 911 with the entire One Chicago universe, and that can be a lot unless you've watched all 3 shows. So just be aware when you're looking for crossovers to like double check the fandoms that are there, because otherwise you'll get halfway through a really good fic just to realise you have no idea what's going on anymore because they're in a fandom you don't know and you're so confused. Trust me, it's happened to me on like multiple occasions. But I guess what I'm saying is, if you have 2 TV shows you really love and have a similar premise, go find a crossover fanfic for them. I promise you it will be so worth it. So if I have convinced you to maybe try out a crossover fanfic, feel free to leave a like on this video and maybe subscribe. I know it's kind of awkward and cringy and like YouTuber-y thing to ask people to subscribe, but I would really appreciate it if you did. And if you want to hear me talk about my like favourite crossover fanfics, like specifically by name, maybe like put it in the comments down below and I'll probably do a video on it. If you want to see more from me, there'll be a link down below to my Twitter, which is @claudiabutworse. And there'll also be a link down below to my TikTok where I post daily TikToks all about fanfiction and fanfiction related stuff, so if you like these videos you'll probably like my TikToks. So yeah, I've been Claudia, I hope you enjoyed the video and I'll hopefully see you all soon. Bye!